Katie Martinez walked slowly down the busy street, her feet tired from standing behind the bookstore counter for 6 hours. The evening air was cool, and she pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. In her pocket, the coins from her tip jar clinked together with each step, $12.37. Not much, but it was hers. The bookstore where she worked 3 days a week was small and quiet. Most customers bought coffee and sat in the corner reading without buying anything. But Katie loved the smell of old books and the peaceful atmosphere. Her boss, Mrs. Coleman, was kind and let her take books home sometimes. The money helped her family with groceries, and every dollar mattered. As Katie approached the metro station, she saw him. An old man sat on the cold concrete, leaning against the brick wall. His back was straight despite his age, and his clothes were old and torn. A piece of cardboard lay beside him with words written in careful handwriting. Anything helps. God bless. Katie had seen many homeless people in Portland, but something about this man was different. His hair was white and messy, but his blue eyes were sharp and clear. They seemed to look right through her, as if he could see things others could not. When their eyes met, she felt a strange pull, like he was someone important she should remember, but could not. Most people walked past him quickly, looking at their phones or talking to friends. A few dropped coins without stopping or looking, but Katie stopped walking. She stood there for a moment watching him. The old man did not ask for money or call out to people passing by. He sat quietly, his hands folded in his lap. There was something proud about the way he held himself, even sitting on the dirty ground. Katie noticed his hands were clean despite his rough appearance, and though his clothes were worn, they were not as dirty as she would expect. "Excuse me, Katie," said softly, stepping closer. The old man looked up at her, and she saw surprise in his eyes. "Yes, young lady." His voice was deep and steady. He spoke clearly, with perfect pronunciation that seemed formal, almost like he was from another time or place. Most people on the street spoke quickly and casually, but this man's words were careful and precise. "I wanted to give you something," Katie said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out all the coins and bills from her tip jar. Without counting them again, she held them out to him. The old man stared at the money in her palm, then looked up at her face. His eyes grew wide, and for a moment, Katie thought she saw something like recognition there, as if he knew her from somewhere. "This is very generous," he said slowly. "But surely you need this money yourself. You are young, and you work hard for it." Katie was surprised. How did he know she worked hard for the money? Most people would just take it and say thank you. "I have enough," she said, though it was not really true. "You look like you need it more than I do." The old man was quiet for a long time, looking at the money, then at her face, then at the money again. Finally, he reached out and took it gently from her hand. His fingers were warm and steady, not shaking like she expected from someone who lived on the street. "Thank you," he said. "This means more to me than you know. Much more." There was something in his voice that made Katie feel like he was telling her something important, something beyond just being grateful for the money. She felt confused, but also curious. "What's your name?" she asked. "Frank," he said after a pause. "Just Frank. And you?" "Katie Martinez." When she said her name, Frank's eyes grew even wider. He stared at her for several seconds without speaking, as if her name had shocked him. Then he seemed to catch himself and smiled. "Katie Martinez," he repeated slowly, like he was testing how the words sounded. "A beautiful name." "Are you from around here?" Katie asked. Something about his accent seemed slightly off, though she could not place what was different about it. "I have traveled very far to be here," Frank said. "Farther than most people travel, in their whole lives." Katie wanted to ask more questions, but she heard her phone buzzing in her backpack. A text from her mother asking when she would be home for dinner. "I have to go," she said, "but maybe I'll see you again?" "I believe you will," Frank said with certainty. "I will be here for a while." As Katie started to walk away, she heard a small metallic sound behind her, like something dropping on the concrete. She turned around and saw Frank quickly picking up something small and silver. In the dim streetlight, it looked like some kind of electronic device, but Frank hid it in his coat so fast that she could not be sure what it was. "Did you drop something?" she asked. "Nothing important," Frank said, but his voice sounded nervous for the first time. "Just an old watch that does not work anymore." Katie nodded, though she felt like there was more to it. "Well, take care of yourself, Frank." "You too, Katie Martinez. And thank you again. Your kindness tonight will not be forgotten." As Katie walked toward the metro entrance, she felt Frank's eyes following her. When she looked back from the top of the stairs, he was still watching her with that intense, knowing look. She waved, and he raised his hand in return. On the train ride home, Katie could not stop thinking about the old man. There had been something almost familiar about him, like meeting a relative she had forgotten, and the way he had said her name, with such surprise and recognition, made her wonder if they had met before somewhere. She also kept thinking about the thing he had dropped. It had not looked like any watch she had ever seen. It was too small and too shiny, and when the light hit it, it seemed to glow slightly. But maybe she had imagined that part. When Katie got home, her little brother Danny was at the kitchen table, doing homework. Their mother was cooking dinner, and the smell of rice and beans filled the small apartment. "How was work?" her mother asked in Spanish. "Good," Katie replied, also in Spanish. "Quiet day." She did not mention giving away all her tip money. Her mother would be proud of her kindness, but worried about the lost income. Katie decided to keep the encounter with Frank to herself for now. That night, as she lay in bed, Katie found herself wondering about Frank again. There had been something special about him, something that made her feel like their meeting was important in a way she did not understand yet. 3 weeks passed since Katie first met Frank, and she found herself looking forward to seeing him every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday after work. She started bringing him sandwiches from home and hot coffee from the bookstore. Her mother never asked why she was packing extra food, but Katie noticed her putting a little more in the lunch bag each time. Frank was always in the same spot by the metro station, sitting with perfect posture against the brick wall. He never seemed surprised to see her, as if he knew exactly when she would arrive. Their conversations became longer each time, and Katie discovered that Frank was unlike any homeless person she had ever met. On her 4th visit, Katie brought him a sandwich and sat down beside him on the concrete. She had been curious about his life for weeks. "Where are you from originally?" she asked. Frank paused, looking up at the sky as if thinking carefully about his answer. "I come from a place that is very different from here. My home is far away, and I cannot return there right now." "What was your job before?" Katie asked. "I was in the military," Frank said. "I held a position of great responsibility. I commanded many people and made decisions that affected thousands of lives." Katie looked at him with surprise. The way Frank carried himself made sense now. Even sitting on the street, he seemed like someone used to being in charge. "What kind of military?" she asked. Frank was quiet for a long moment. "A kind that does not exist yet," he said finally. Katie did not understand what he meant, but something in his tone told her not to ask more questions about it. As the weeks went on, Katie noticed strange things about Frank's knowledge. When she mentioned her science homework about the solar system, Frank began explaining the planets in incredible detail. He knew facts about Mars that she had never heard before, like the exact composition of its atmosphere and the location of underground water sources that had not been discovered yet. "How do you know so much about space?" Katie asked. "I have always been interested in the stars," Frank replied. "I have spent a great deal of time studying them." But it was more than just interest. Frank spoke about distant planets like someone who had seen them personally. He described the rings of Saturn with the precision of someone who had flown through them, and when he talked about the moons of Jupiter, his eyes seemed to glow with memory. Another time, Katie mentioned that her phone had been acting strangely, turning on and off by itself. Frank immediately became alert. "What kind of malfunctions?" he asked urgently. "Just weird things. Sometimes it shows messages that disappear right away. And yesterday it started playing music I never downloaded." Frank's face grew serious. "Have you noticed this happening to other people's phones?" Katie thought about it. Actually, yes, my brother Danny said his tablet has been doing weird things too, and some kids at school mentioned their computers freezing in strange patterns. Frank nodded as if this information was very important to him. You should be careful with electronic devices for a while. Sometimes they can pick up signals that are not meant for them. Katie wanted to ask what kind of signals, but Frank changed the subject quickly. The strangest conversation happened on a rainy evening in October. Katie had brought Frank an umbrella and was sitting under it with him when she mentioned a dream she had been having repeatedly. "It's so vivid," she told him. "I dream about being on a huge spaceship, looking out at Earth from space. There are people around me, but they look different somehow, more advanced. And there are beings that are definitely not human, but they seem friendly." Frank dropped the coffee cup Katie had brought him. It fell to the ground and rolled away, but he did not seem to notice. "Tell me more about this dream," he said, his voice tense. "Well, in the dream, I'm older, maybe in my 20s, and I'm wearing some kind of uniform I've never seen before. The ship is beautiful, all white and silver, and there are windows everywhere showing stars and planets. The strangest part is that everyone seems to know me, like I'm important somehow." Frank stared at her with an expression she could not read. Fear? Hope? Recognition? "Do you remember any words from the dream? Any names or places?" Katie closed her eyes, trying to remember. "Sometimes I hear people talking about something called the Kethvar, and there's mention of a place called the Terran Colonial Fleet, but I don't know what any of it means." Frank went completely still. For several seconds, he did not even seem to be breathing. "Have you told anyone else about these dreams?" he asked finally. "Just my brother Danny. He thinks they're connected to all the weird electronic problems people have been having around the city." "Your brother is very perceptive," Frank said quietly. Meanwhile, Danny had indeed been paying attention to the strange occurrences around Portland. At 15, he was 2 years younger than Katie, but obsessed with unexplained phenomena. He spent hours on internet forums discussing UFO sightings and conspiracy theories. "Katie, you need to see this," Danny said one evening, showing her his laptop screen. "Look at all these reports from our area just in the last month." The screen showed a map of Portland with dozens of red dots marking locations where people had reported unusual experiences. Electronic malfunctions, strange dreams about space travel, and sightings of unusual lights in the sky. "And look at this pattern," Danny continued, clicking to show the dates and times. "All of these incidents started happening right around the time you began visiting that homeless guy." Katie felt a chill run down her spine. "That's just a coincidence." "Is it? Look at the locations." Danny zoomed in on the map. "Every single report comes from within a 5-mile radius of the metro station, where you meet him." Katie stared at the map. Danny was right. The strange occurrences formed a perfect circle around Frank's location. "There's more," Danny said. "I've been monitoring radio frequencies, and there are signals coming from downtown that don't match any known broadcast patterns. They're not from any satellite or ground station we know about." "What kind of signals?" "I don't know, but they're incredibly advanced. The technology behind them is way beyond anything we have now. And Katie, they're getting stronger every week." That night, Katie lay in bed thinking about everything Danny had shown her. The dreams, the electronic problems, the unexplained signals, and Frank's impossible knowledge about space and planets. Everything seemed connected somehow, but she could not figure out how. She also remembered the metallic device Frank had dropped that first night. He had said it was just a broken watch, but what if it was something else? What if Frank was not just an ordinary homeless man? The next morning, Katie decided she needed to ask Frank some direct questions. She packed an extra-large lunch and prepared herself for a conversation that might change everything she thought she knew about her new friend. As she walked toward the metro station after work, Katie noticed that her phone was acting up again. The screen flickered, showing images of stars and distant planets for just a split second before returning to normal. But this time, instead of feeling annoyed, she felt excited. Maybe Danny was right. Maybe something extraordinary was happening in Portland, and somehow she was right in the middle of it. Katie arrived at the metro station on a cold November evening, carrying a thermos of hot soup and a thick blanket her mother had insisted she bring. The temperature had dropped suddenly, and she was worried about Frank spending another night outside in the freezing air, but Frank was not in his usual spot against the brick wall. Katie looked around, confused. In all the weeks she had been visiting him, Frank had never missed being there when she arrived. She walked around the building, checking the other sides, but found nothing. Then she heard a soft coughing sound coming from the narrow alley behind, the metro station. Katie followed the sound and found Frank lying on the ground between two large garbage containers. He was curled up on his side, shivering violently. "Frank!" Katie dropped her backpack and knelt beside him. "What happened? Are you okay?" Frank tried to sit up but fell back down. His face was pale and sweat covered his forehead despite the cold air. "Katie," he whispered, "you should not be here. It is not safe." "What do you mean, not safe? You're sick. I need to call an ambulance." "No," Frank said urgently, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength. "No hospitals. No doctors. They would not understand." Katie pulled out her phone, but as soon as she touched the screen, it began flickering wildly. Images flashed across it too quickly to see clearly, but she caught glimpses of star maps, technical diagrams, and symbols she did not recognize. "Your phone," Frank said weakly. "The interference is getting stronger. My equipment is failing." "Your equipment?" "Frank, what are you talking about?" Frank looked at her for a long moment as if making a difficult decision. "Katie, there are things about me that I have not told you. Things that will be hard for you to believe." As he spoke, something strange began happening to Frank's appearance. His weathered, wrinkled face seemed to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. For just a moment, Katie thought she saw something different underneath, but then his normal appearance returned. "Did you see that?" Frank asked quietly. Katie nodded, too shocked to speak. "My disguise is breaking down," Frank explained. "I have been using technology to change how I look, but it requires constant energy. I am getting too weak to maintain it." "Disguise? Frank, you're scaring me." Frank struggled to sit up against the brick wall. "I know this will sound impossible, but I need you to listen carefully. My real name is not Frank, it is Commander Zethka of the Terran Colonial Fleet." Katie stared at him. "The what?" "I am a human being, like you. But I come from a time nearly 400 years in the future. I have traveled back in time to be here in this year, because something very important was supposed to happen that will change the course of human history." As Frank spoke, his appearance flickered again. This time, Katie saw more clearly what lay beneath the disguise. His skin was pale and seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. His eyes, while still blue, appeared deeper and more luminous. His features were sharper, more refined, as if evolution had continued improving the human form for centuries. "That's impossible," Katie whispered. "I know how it sounds," Frank said. "But think about everything you have noticed. My knowledge of space, and planets that have not been fully explored yet. My formal way of speaking, the electronic interference that happens around me, the dreams you have been having." Katie's mind raced, remembering all the strange things about Frank that had never made sense. His perfect posture, his unusual vocabulary, his detailed knowledge of astronomy, and the mysterious device he had dropped that first night. "The dreams," she said slowly. "You asked me about the dreams." "Yes. You have been dreaming about the future I come from, about spaceships and alien races and your role in making contact with them. Those are not just dreams, Katie. They are memories bleeding through time." "Memories of what?" Frank's disguise flickered more frequently now, and Katie could see his true appearance more clearly. He looked younger than she had thought, maybe in his 40s, but with an ageless quality that suggested he had seen more of the universe than most people could imagine. "Memories of what you will become," Frank said. "In my timeline, you grow up to be one of the most important people in human history. You are the one who makes first contact with a peaceful alien race called the Kethvar. That contact leads to a golden age for humanity." Katie felt dizzy. "This is crazy. I'm just a high school student who works in a bookstore." "You are much more than that," Frank said. "You have something that is rare and precious. You have genuine compassion and kindness, even for strangers. That quality is what attracts the Kethvar to humanity. They have been watching Earth for decades, waiting for the right moment to make contact. And you think I'm that moment? I know you are. Because in my timeline it already happened. When you were 17 years old, you performed an act of kindness that caught the attention of a Kethvar scout ship. They landed and chose you as their first human contact, because they could sense your pure intentions." Frank paused, looking directly into Katie's eyes. "But something has gone wrong. I was sent back in time because our instruments detected that the timeline was changing. The first contact event that was supposed to happen in your future never occurred. Without that contact, humanity follows a much darker path." Katie tried to process what Frank was telling her. "So you came back to make sure it happens?" "I came back to find out why it did not happen, and to try to fix it. But there is something else you need to know." Frank took a deep breath. "I am not just any soldier from the future, Katie. I am your descendant, your great-great-great-grandson." The words hit Katie like a physical blow. She stared at Frank, looking for family resemblance in his altered features. Now that she knew what to look for, she could see similarities in the shape of his eyes and the line of his jaw. "That's why you recognized me that first night," she said. "Yes, I have seen pictures of you my entire life. You are famous in my time as the woman who saved humanity's future. But when I arrived in this timeline and found you, I realized that the events leading to first contact had been disrupted." Katie stood up abruptly and began pacing in the narrow alley. "This is too much. Time travel, aliens, the future of humanity. I can't handle this. Katie, please. I know it is overwhelming, but you need to understand. There are forces working against us, beings from another dimension who want to prevent humanity from reaching its potential. They have been interfering with the timeline, trying to stop the chain of events that leads to our golden age." "What kind of beings?" Frank's appearance flickered again, and for a moment, he looked completely like his future self, pale and luminous in the darkness. "They are called the Void Collective. They feed on the potential futures of civilizations, destroying them before they can achieve greatness. They have already begun their attack on this timeline." Katie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air, the electronic interference, the strange dreams everyone is having. That's them. That is their influence spreading. They are trying to create despair and confusion, to prevent the conditions that lead to first contact. But Katie, there is something they did not count on. "What?" Frank smiled, and despite his alien appearance, Katie could see warmth and hope in his expression. "They did not count on your kindness being stronger than their influence. The act of compassion you showed me that first night, giving me your tip money even though you needed it yourself, that was the beginning of the chain reaction that leads to our future." Katie sat back down beside Frank, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. "So what happens now?" "Now we prepare," Frank said. "Because the Void Collective knows I am here, and they will be coming for both of us soon. The real battle for humanity's future is about to begin." As if summoned by his words, all the streetlights around the metro station began flickering at once, and Katie's phone screen went completely black. In the distance, she could hear other people shouting in confusion as electronic devices throughout the city began failing simultaneously. "They have found us," Frank whispered. The streetlights stopped flickering, but an eerie silence settled over the city. Katie could hear car alarms going off in the distance and people shouting from their apartments as electronic devices throughout Portland continued to malfunction. Frank struggled to stand up, his disguise now completely gone. In his true form, he looked both ancient and timeless, his pale skin giving off a soft glow in the darkness. Katie helped him to his feet, still trying to process everything he had told her. "We need to get somewhere safe," Frank said, pulling a small device from his coat pocket. It was the same metallic object Katie had seen him drop that first night, but now it was glowing with blue light and making soft, beeping sounds. "What is that thing?" "A temporal communicator," Frank explained. "It allows me to stay in contact with my time and monitor changes in the timeline. But it also means the Void Collective can track me if they get close enough. Katie looked at the device with wonder and fear. So that's really technology from the future? One of the few pieces that survived my journey back. Most of my equipment was damaged when I arrived in your time. I have been living as a homeless man for 3 years, waiting for the right moment and trying to repair what I could. They walked quickly away from the metro station, Frank leading Katie through side streets she had never seen before. Despite his illness, he moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going. You said I was supposed to make first contact with aliens when I'm 17, Katie said as they walked. That's less than 2 years from now. How is that supposed to happen? Frank stopped at the entrance to an abandoned warehouse and pressed his hand against what looked like a normal lock. The device in his pocket glowed brighter, and Katie heard a soft clicking sound as the door opened. In the original timeline, it began with a simple act of kindness, Frank said, leading her inside. A 17-year-old girl saw an injured bird in a park and spent her lunch money to take it to a veterinarian. Unknown to her, a Kethvar scout ship was monitoring Earth from orbit, studying human behavior. The inside of the warehouse was not what Katie expected. Most of the space was empty, but in one corner Frank had set up what looked like a small laboratory. Strange equipment covered several tables, all glowing with the same blue light as his communicator. The Kethvar have technology that can read emotional energy, Frank continued, checking the readings on various devices. They were watching for signs of a species that had evolved beyond selfishness and violence. When they detected the pure compassion of that girl helping the bird, they knew humanity was ready for contact. Katie sat down on a crate, overwhelmed by the implications. And that girl was me? In the original timeline, yes, but when I arrived in this time, I discovered that the event never happened. The bird was never injured, the girl never had the chance to show kindness, and the Kethavar scout ship left Earth's orbit without making contact. Frank activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of Earth with several points of light moving around it. These are Kethvar ships. They have been monitoring Earth for 47 years, waiting for the right signal. Without first contact, they eventually gave up and classified humanity as not ready for galactic civilization. What happened to humanity without their help? Frank's expression grew dark. War. Environmental collapse. By 2157, Earth's population had fallen to less than 2 billion people. Humanity did eventually develop space travel and spread to other planets, but we became conquerors rather than protectors. We fought with every species we encountered. The holographic display changed to show images of massive space battles and burning planets. Katie watched in horror as human ships destroyed alien civilizations. That is the timeline I originally came from, Frank said quietly. We became the most feared species in the galaxy. We had incredible technology and military power, but we lost our humanity in the process. How did you end up becoming better people in your timeline? We did not. Not at first. Frank manipulated the hologram to show a different sequence of events. The change came when we encountered a species that refused to fight back. The Kethvar had evolved beyond violence, and when we attacked them, they simply absorbed our weapons fire and asked us why we were so afraid. Katie watched as the hologram showed human ships being surrounded by beautiful, crystalline vessels that seemed to be made of pure light. Their response confused our military leaders, Frank continued. No species had ever reacted to our aggression with compassion before. It forced us to question who we had become. Some humans, led by a woman named Admiral Katie Martinez, chose to lay down their weapons and learn from the Kethvar instead of fighting them. Katie's eyes widened. Admiral Katie Martinez? That was me? Your future self in that timeline. You convinced humanity to change course, to become protectors of smaller civilizations instead of destroyers. It took generations, but eventually, we became the species we were meant to be. Frank turned off the hologram and sat down across from Katie, but that timeline required centuries of war and suffering before humanity learned to be better. When I discovered the possibility of preventing that dark period entirely, I volunteered for the temporal mission. So you came back to make sure The original first contact happened when I was 17? Exactly. If the Kethvar make peaceful contact with humanity early in our development, we skip the dark centuries entirely. We learn compassion and wisdom from them while we are still young as a species. Katie stood up and walked over to one of Frank's devices. Up close, she could see that it was monitoring something, displaying waves of energy that pulsed in different colors. What does this one do? It measures emotional resonance, Frank explained. The Kethvar can detect acts of genuine kindness from orbit. This device helps me understand what they are looking for. Katie watched the patterns on the screen, noting how they seemed to respond to her presence. Is it detecting something now? Yes. Ever since you first gave me that money, these readings have been getting stronger. Your natural compassion creates waves that extend far beyond what most humans can generate. Frank joined her at the device, studying the readings with concern. But there is a problem. The Void Collective feeds on these same energy patterns. The stronger your compassion becomes, the more they are attracted to this location. What exactly are these Void Collective beings? Frank activated another display that showed creatures of pure darkness, constantly shifting and changing shape. They exist in the spaces between dimensions. They survive by finding civilizations that are about to achieve greatness and destroying their potential futures. They consume the energy of what could have been. Katie shuddered at the sight of the creatures. Why do they want to stop humanity? Because our future timeline, the one where we become galactic protectors, generates more positive energy than any other species they have encountered. If humanity achieves its potential, we become a threat to their food source. Other civilizations would be inspired by our example. The devices around the warehouse suddenly began beeping frantically. Frank rushed to check the readings, his face growing pale with alarm. They are here, he said. The Void Collective has found us. We need to leave immediately. But where can we go? If they can track your technology, won't they find us anywhere? Frank was already gathering essential equipment and shoving it into a backpack. There is one place they cannot easily reach. We need to go to where this all started, back to the metro station. That's crazy. Won't that make us easier targets? Frank shouldered his pack and headed for the door. Sometimes the most dangerous place is also the safest. The metro station is where you first showed me kindness. That location has become a focal point for positive energy. The Void Collective can attack us there, but they cannot completely corrupt the space. As they left the warehouse, Katie could see dark shapes moving in the shadows between buildings. The temperature dropped noticeably, and she could hear a sound like whispers speaking in languages she did not recognize. Frank, she said, grabbing his arm. I'm scared. Frank stopped and looked at her with eyes that held centuries of experience and wisdom. Fear is natural, Katie. But remember what you told me that first night. You said I looked like I needed your help more than you needed your tip money. That instinct to help others even when you are afraid is what makes you special. But I'm just one person. How can I possibly save humanity's future? Frank smiled, and for a moment Katie could see the family resemblance clearly. You do not save humanity's future through great acts of heroism. You save it through small acts of kindness that inspire others to be better. That is the most powerful force in the universe. As they walked back toward the metro station, Katie realized that her entire life had been leading to this moment. Every choice she had made, every person she had helped, had been preparing her for what was about to happen. Katie and Frank hurried through the dark streets toward the metro station. The city around them felt wrong. Streetlights flickered on and off in strange patterns, and the few people they passed walked with their heads down, looking defeated and hopeless. Even the air seemed thicker, making it harder to breathe. Do you feel that? Katie asked, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. The Void Collective's influence, Frank replied, checking his glowing device. They drain hope and happiness from the environment around them. People feel sad and angry without understanding why. As they got closer to the metro station, Katie noticed more people than usual wandering the streets despite the late hour. But these people moved strangely, walking in circles or standing perfectly still, staring at nothing. Their eyes were empty, like they had forgotten what they were supposed to be doing. Frank, what's wrong with them? The Void Collective feeds on human potential. When they drain too much from a person, it leaves them hollow for a while. The effect will wear off, but they will remember this night as the saddest they have ever felt. Katie watched a woman in a business suit walk past them 3 times, following the exact same path each time. The sight made her feel sick to her stomach. How many of them are there? She asked. 3 agents were sent to this timeline, Frank said. But each one can affect hundreds of people at once. They do not need to touch someone to drain their energy. When they reached the metro station, Katie was surprised to see her brother Danny sitting on the steps, holding his laptop and looking confused. Danny? Katie ran over to him. What are you doing here? Danny looked up at her with unfocused eyes. I don't know. I was at home doing homework, and then I felt like I needed to come here, like something important was happening. He noticed Frank standing behind Katie. And who is this guy? He looks different from the homeless man you described. Katie realized that Frank's disguise was completely gone now. To Danny, he would look like a stranger. This is Frank, she said carefully. He's the person I've been helping. Danny stared at Frank's glowing pale skin and luminous eyes. Dude, are you wearing some kind of special effects makeup? You look like you're from a sci-fi movie. Before Katie could answer, the temperature around them dropped another 10 degrees. A shadow fell across the metro station even though there were no clouds in the sky. Frank's device began beeping rapidly. They are here, Frank whispered. 3 figures emerged from the darkness between the buildings. At first, they looked like normal people. A man in a business suit, a woman in casual clothes, and a teenager about Katie's age. But as they got closer, Katie could see that something was terribly wrong with them. Their skin looked gray and lifeless. Their eyes were completely black, with no white parts visible. When they walked, their feet did not make any sound, and they seemed to float slightly above the ground. Most disturbing of all, the air around them shimmered with dark energy that made Katie feel hopeless just by looking at it. Katie Martinez, the business suit figure, spoke with a voice that sounded like multiple people talking at once. You will come with us. Stay behind me, Frank said, pulling a device from his backpack that looked like a silver rod. When he pressed a button on it, the rod extended into a staff that glowed with bright blue light. Danny jumped to his feet, his laptop clattering to the ground. Okay, what the hell is going on here? Katie, who are these people? Beings from another dimension, Katie said, surprised at how calm her own voice sounded. They want to destroy humanity's future. The girl speaks truth, the woman figure said, but her words will not save her. We have already begun draining the hope from this city. Soon all humans here will be too depressed to care about helping others. Katie looked around and realized they were right. More people had gathered around the metro station, but they all stood motionless with empty expressions. Even Danny seemed to be fighting against a growing sadness. Why do you want to hurt people? Katie asked the Void agents. We do not hurt, the teenager figure replied. We feed. Every civilization reaches a moment when it can choose greatness or destruction. We ensure they choose destruction. It provides us with more energy than greatness ever could. Frank stepped forward, raising his glowing staff. You will not take her. Humanity deserves the chance to become what it was meant to be. The 3 Void agents laughed, a sound like glass breaking. One broken soldier from a timeline that no longer exists? You cannot stop us. Frank activated his staff, sending a beam of blue light toward the agents. They absorbed the energy easily, becoming slightly more solid and menacing. Your technology feeds us too, the business suit figure said. We grow stronger with every attack. Katie felt the hopelessness pressing down on her like a heavy blanket. She could see Frank struggling against it too, his glowing skin becoming dimmer. Even his advanced technology was not enough to fight beings that fed on energy itself. But then Katie noticed something strange. While everyone else in the area looked defeated and empty, she could still feel her own emotions clearly. The despair was trying to affect her, but it could not completely take hold. Frank, she said, I don't think their power works on me the same way. Frank looked at her with surprise. Your natural compassion. It is acting like a shield. The void. Agents noticed this too and focused their attention directly on Katie. The dark energy around them intensified, trying to break through her emotional defenses. Impossible, the woman agent said. No human can resist our influence completely. Katie felt the attack like cold water being poured over her thoughts. The agents were trying to make her believe that helping others was pointless, that kindness was weakness, that no one cared about her efforts. But every time the dark thoughts tried to take hold, she remembered something good: bringing Frank food, helping her mother with groceries, tutoring younger kids at school. You're wrong, Katie said, taking a step toward the agents. Kindness isn't weakness, it's the strongest thing there is. Danny, still fighting against the despair, looked at his sister with confusion and growing understanding. Katie, what are you doing? What I should have done a long time ago, Katie replied. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the extra sandwich she had brought for Frank. Anyone hungry? The simple question, asked with genuine care, sent a ripple of energy through the area. Frank's device registered a massive spike in positive emotional resonance. Katie walked over to one of the empty-eyed people standing nearby, a homeless woman she had seen around the neighborhood before. Hi, I'm Katie. Are you okay? The woman blinked, her eyes slowly focusing. I don't know. I felt so sad. Like nothing mattered anymore. Everything matters, Katie said, offering her the sandwich. Especially you. As the woman took the food, with shaking hands, her expression began to change. The hopelessness faded from her face, replaced by surprise and gratitude. The void agents hissed like angry cats. Stop her! She is breaking our hold on these humans! But Katie was already moving to the next person, a man in his 20s who had been standing motionless for the past hour. Hey, do you need help getting home? Danny watched his sister with growing amazement. Despite being surrounded by creatures from another dimension and technology from the future, Katie was doing the most human thing possible, caring for strangers. I get it now, Danny said, picking up his laptop and walking over to join Katie. You're not just helping random people. You're saving all of us. Frank smiled as he watched more people begin to wake up from the void influence. Each act of kindness created a chain reaction, inspiring others to remember their own capacity for compassion. The Void Collective made a critical error, Frank said, raising his staff again. They underestimated the power of human connection. As more people around the metro station began helping each other, the dark energy surrounding the Void agents started to weaken. They were creatures that fed on despair and isolation, and Katie was creating the exact opposite environment. But the agents were not defeated yet. With angry screams that shattered windows in nearby buildings, they began to change shape, growing larger and more monstrous as they prepared for a final attack. The three Void agents grew larger and more terrifying, their human disguises melting away completely. They now looked like living shadows with burning red eyes and claws made of pure darkness. Their voices became a roar that shook the ground beneath everyone's feet. We will not be defeated by simple human emotions, the largest agent screamed. But Katie did not run or hide. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She walked directly toward the monstrous creatures. Katie, no! Frank shouted, raising his staff to protect her. It's okay, Katie called back. I understand now. As she approached the Void agents, Katie felt their power trying to crush her spirit. They sent waves of despair, loneliness, and fear directly into her mind. Images flashed before her eyes of humanity's darkest moments. Wars, hatred, people hurting each other for selfish reasons. But for every dark image they showed her, Katie remembered something better. Her mother working 2 jobs to support their family, but still finding time to help neighbors. Her brother Danny sharing his lunch with kids who forgot theirs. Mrs. Coleman at the bookstore letting people read for hours without buying anything because she knew they needed the escape. You show me the worst of humanity, Katie said to the agents still walking toward them. But I live with the best of it every day. The Void agents attacked her with everything they had. trying to break her spirit with pure emotional darkness. Katie felt it like being underwater, drowning in sadness and hopelessness. But she kept thinking about Frank, living alone on the streets for 3 years, waiting patiently for the chance to save his entire species. "Even you," she said to the agents, "you must have been something else before you became this. Something that got hurt or lost and decided that destroying was easier than creating." The largest agent paused its attack, confused by Katie's words. "I feel sorry for you," Katie continued. "You've forgotten what it's like to care about others. That must be the loneliest thing in any universe." Danny watched his sister with amazement. "She's not fighting them," he said to Frank. "She's trying to help them." Frank nodded, his eyes wide with understanding. "In my timeline, Admiral Katie Martinez defeated enemies through force and military strategy. But this Katie is stronger. She defeats enemies by refusing to see them as enemies." The other people around the metro station, now free from the void influence, began to understand what was happening. Without being asked, they started forming a circle around Katie and the agents. They did not try to fight or attack. Instead, they simply stood together, supporting each other. Mrs. Coleman from the bookstore was there, having followed her instinct to come help. She stood next to Danny, putting a protective arm around his shoulders. The homeless woman, Katie, had given the sandwich to stood beside a businessman she had never met before. People of all ages and backgrounds linked arms, creating a human chain of connection and support. "What are they doing?" the smallest void agent asked, its voice now uncertain instead of threatening. "They are showing you something you have forgotten," Katie said gently. "They are showing you what it means to belong somewhere." The warm energy of human connection began to fill the area around the metro station. Frank's devices registered emotional resonance levels higher than anything he had ever seen. The positive energy was so strong that it started to push back against the void agent's darkness. But instead of trying to destroy the agents, the energy surrounded them like a gentle embrace. For the first time in perhaps thousands of years, the void beings felt something other than hunger and emptiness. "We do not understand," the largest agent said, its monstrous form beginning to shrink. "This energy should feed us, but it does something else." "It's healing you," Katie said. "You've been so busy taking from others that you forgot how to receive freely given love." The 3 agents continued to change, their dark forms becoming smaller and less frightening. As the community's combined compassion washed over them, they began to remember what they had been before they became creatures of void and hunger. Frank stepped forward, lowering his staff. "In all my studies of the Void Collective, no one ever considered that they might be victims too. We only thought about defeating them, not helping them." The agents were now human-sized again, though they still looked strange and otherworldly. The largest one looked directly at Katie with eyes that were no longer black, but a deep blue that reminded her of Frank's. "We have been empty for so long," it said in a voice that now sounded like just one person instead of many. "We forgot that there was any other way to exist." Katie reached out her hand toward the being. "There's always another way. You just have to be willing to try." The former void agent stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment, then slowly reached out and touched her fingers. The contact created a flash of golden light that spread outward from the metro station, washing over the entire city of Portland. Frank's temporal communicator began beeping frantically. He looked at the readings and smiled wider than Katie had ever seen. "The timeline is changing," he announced. "Not just back to the original path, but to something completely new. Something better than either future I've seen." Danny, still holding his laptop, watched as the screen filled with new information. "The electronic interference is gone, but look at this. I'm getting signals from space. Multiple signals, all trying to communicate with Earth." Katie looked up at the night sky and gasped. Lights were moving among the stars, growing brighter as they approached Earth. But these lights felt warm and welcoming, not threatening. "The Kethavar," Frank said with wonder. "But they are not alone. Word has spread to other peaceful species. They can sense what happened here tonight." The 3 former Void agents stood together, no longer monstrous but still clearly not human. The largest one spoke to Katie again. We have much to learn about existing without taking from others. Will you teach us? We'll all teach each other, Katie replied. That's what communities do. Over the following weeks, everything changed. The ships that landed in Portland brought beings from 7 different species, all eager to meet the humans who had shown that healing was possible, even for creatures from the void between dimensions. Katie became Earth's first ambassador to the galactic community, but she insisted on finishing high school first. She continued working at the bookstore and bringing food to homeless people, because she understood that small acts of kindness were just as important as big diplomatic meetings. Frank chose to stay in the present timeline rather than return to his future. He opened a school where humans and aliens could learn together, teaching courses on interspecies communication and temporal theory. But his favorite class was the one he co-taught with Katie on the practical applications of compassion. Danny became a technical advisor to the alien visitors, helping them understand human technology while learning about theirs. He still posted on conspiracy theory forums, but now he posted about real aliens who brought gifts of knowledge instead of invasion plans. The 3 former Void agents established a rehabilitation center for other beings who had lost their way in the darkness between dimensions. They discovered that there were many creatures throughout the universe who needed healing instead of destruction. Katie's mother was confused when alien ambassadors started showing up for dinner, but she adapted quickly. She began teaching cooking, classes to beings from other worlds, proving that the universal language of hospitality transcended species barriers. One evening, exactly 1 year after their first meeting, Katie and Frank sat together at the metro station. It had been turned into a memorial park celebrating the night when Earth joined the galactic community. Do you ever regret not going back to your original timeline? Katie asked. Frank smiled, watching human children play with young aliens in the park. This timeline is better than any future I could have imagined. We did not just save humanity's potential, we helped heal the universe itself. Katie nodded, feeling proud of what they had accomplished together. And it all started with $12.37. No, Frank corrected her gently. It started with a young girl who saw someone in need and chose to help, even when she did not have much to give. That choice changed everything. Above them, the night sky was full of ships from dozens of species, all coming to Earth to learn about the power of human kindness. Katie had discovered that the most important identity anyone could have was simply being someone who cared about others. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but the greatest wonder of all was the simple, human capacity to love without expecting anything in return. That power could transform even the darkest void into something bright and full of hope.